I took my late wife's camera to be developed, expecting memories. The photographer, a family friend, stopped me and said, "Don't show these photos to anyone else." Curious, I asked why. He handed me a sealed envelope with trembling hands. What I saw in those final pictures revealed a terrifying secret that would change everything. Please subscribe and share where you're watching from in the comments below. For 3 months, that camera sat untouched. I had no idea it would change my life forever. 3 months after burying my wife, I finally found the courage to touch her camera. My name is Stephen Mills, and at 67, I never thought I'd be learning to live alone on this Montana ranch. Natalie and I raised 2 kids here, Bryce, who runs a struggling trucking business in town, and Adrienne, who married into money when she wed Roderick Stone 6 years ago. We built a good life on these 1,200 acres, watching our cattle graze and our grandchildren grow. Then April came and everything changed. The old Nikon sat on our kitchen counter like a monument to grief. Natalie had carried that thing everywhere during her last year, documenting our ranch with the passion of someone seeing it for the first time. She'd been the most careful driver I knew, but they said her brakes failed on Highway 12. Just one of those things that happen to older vehicles, the sheriff told me. I'd been avoiding Howard's camera shop in town, but this morning felt different. Maybe it was the autumn light slanting through our window, the same golden hour she'd chased religiously. I wrapped the camera in an old flannel shirt and drove 20 minutes into Millfield. Howard Sinclair had been developing our family photos since before we were married. His shop sat between Murphy's Hardware and the old diner, now just another empty storefront in a dying town. "Stephen," Howard looked up with careful sympathy. "Been wondering when you'd come by." I placed the camera on his counter. "Her last roll. I'm ready." Howard handled the Nikon with reverence. She loved this old girl, always asking about f-stops and shutter speeds. Said photography taught her to really see things. The familiar tightness gripped my throat. "How long?" "Give me an hour." I walked Millfield's empty streets, counting for lease signs like tombstones. When I returned, Howard was waiting with a manila envelope, his expression troubled. "Most of these are beautiful, Stephen. Real professional quality, the ranch cattle, that old oak by your gate." He paused, glancing toward his window. "But there's something you need to see. Come to the back." He led me past displays to his development room. Photos hung from a clothesline like evidence. The first shot showed typical ranch scenes. Then they changed. "These last few are different," Howard said quietly. "Looked like she was hiding, taking pictures from behind trees." The images showed our eastern pasture from concealed angles. Men in white protective suits working near Willow Creek. Equipment I didn't recognize. Then the final photograph hit me like a punch. Roderick Stone. My son-in-law stood beside our creek in pre-dawn darkness. Next to him, a stranger helped dump contents from large metal containers directly into the water. Even in the grainy light, their actions were unmistakable, deliberate, secretive, criminal. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. Howard stepped closer. "Stephen, these photos. If the wrong people know she took them, you could be in serious danger. Hide them somewhere safe." My hands trembled as I reached for the pictures. "What were they dumping?" "Nothing legal." "And Stephen," Howard gripped my shoulder, "be very careful who you trust. If they killed her for these photos..." The words hung between us like a death sentence. Natalie's brake failure suddenly made terrible sense. "You think they murdered my wife?" Howard's silence was answer enough. I drove home with the envelope burning against the passenger seat. How long had Natalie been watching them? What had she discovered? And why hadn't she told me she was in danger? Our ranch looked different as I pulled into the driveway, not like the sanctuary we'd built, but like a crime scene. The creek where we'd taught our grandchildren to fish, now contaminated by whatever my own son-in-law had been dumping. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? That same afternoon, Adrienne and Roderick showed up unannounced. I'd barely finished hiding the photographs when their BMW crunched up the gravel drive. Through the kitchen window, I watched my daughter emerge, her designer heels completely wrong for ranch life. Roderick straightened his expensive suit, the kind of man who wore ties to visit family. They'd been coming around more since the funeral, always with careful concern that felt rehearsed. "Dad, you look tired." Adrienne kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp against the smell of hay. "This house feels so empty." "I'm managing fine." Roderick settled into my recliner without invitation. "Stephen, we've been worried. Managing 1,200 acres alone at your age, that's tremendous responsibility. Been doing it for 40 years. "With Natalie's help," Adrienne said softly. "But now I do it alone." Roderick leaned forward, his smile practiced. Actually, that's why we're here. I've been speaking with business associates about your situation. There's a development company very interested in this property. It's not for sale. Of course not. Adrian rushed in. We're just exploring options for your security. Roderick pulled out a leather folder. $3 million, Stephen. Cash offer, quick closing. You could buy a nice place in town, one of those condos near the golf course. I stared at the papers. $3 million for land my grandfather had cleared by hand. This ranch has been in our family 80 years. Times change. You're 67, Stephen. How much longer can you handle the physical demands? Something in his tone made my skin crawl. The same cold calculation from that photograph. You know, Stephen, he continued, standing to loom over me, ranch work is dangerous at your age. Heavy machinery, rough terrain, unpredictable animals. A man could get seriously hurt if he's not careful. One moment of inattention, and he let the words hang there. And are you threatening me, Roderick? His laugh was too quick. Threatening? I'm trying to help family. I'm concerned about your safety. Accidents happen on ranches every day. Adrian touched his arm. Honey, maybe we should... Your father's smart, Adrian. He understands what I'm saying. Don't you, Stephen? I understood perfectly. The same people who'd killed my wife were telling me I might be next. If I need time to think. Of course, but don't take too long. Roderick gathered his papers. Opportunities like this don't last forever. And frankly, at your age, time isn't something you have in abundance. They left with promises to check on me soon. I watched their taillights disappear, hands shaking with rage. Locking up for the night, I found a business card that had slipped from Roderick's folder, wedged between couch cushions. The company name meant nothing, Clearwater Environmental Solutions. But the address was local, and the logo showed a drop of water with a mountain behind it. The same logo I'd glimpsed on equipment in Natalie's photographs. Everything was connected, and I was running out of time to figure out how. The next morning, I searched through Natalie's veterinary office for the first time. I'd avoided this room since April, unable to face her meticulously organized files and the faint scent of antiseptic that still lingered. But yesterday's discoveries had changed everything. If my wife had been investigating something dangerous enough to get her killed, the answers might be hidden among her work. Her desk sat exactly as she'd left it. Appointment calendar open to April 18th, the day she died. Coffee mug with a ring stain, reading glasses folded beside her computer. I started with the filing cabinet, working through patient records for our neighbor's livestock. At first, everything seemed normal. Vaccination schedules, pregnancy checks, routine treatments. Then I noticed a pattern in her handwriting. Small question marks penciled beside certain entries, all from the past 6 months, all involving animals from farms along Willow Creek. Unusual symptoms she'd written beside one entry. Cattle showing signs of toxicity, no obvious cause. Another file contained photographs of sick animals, cows with patchy hair loss, horses with respiratory distress, a neighbor's dog that had died after drinking from the creek. My hands trembled as I pulled out a manila folder marked Personal Research. Inside were soil samples in small glass vials, each labeled with GPS coordinates. Water test results from 3 different labs. The numbers meant nothing to me, but Natalie had highlighted them in red ink and written dangerous levels across the top. She'd been building a case, documenting evidence, preparing for something. I moved to her bookshelf, running my fingers along veterinary textbooks and journals. Behind her diploma from Colorado State, something crinkled. A small envelope sealed and tucked into the frame. Inside was a brass key and a handwritten note in her careful script. Stephen, if something happens to me, this key opens box 247 at First National Denver. Trust Howard. Don't trust anyone else. The ranch is in danger. I love you. N. The paper slipped from my fingers as the full weight hit me. Natalie hadn't just stumbled onto something suspicious. She'd been systematically investigating it, collecting evidence, preparing for the possibility that her discovery might cost her life. She'd known she was in danger. I sank into her desk chair, surrounded by the careful documentation of what might have been her final weeks. How long had she been afraid? Why hadn't she told me? Had she tried to warn me in ways I'd been too blind to see? The key felt warm in my palm, solid and real. Whatever she'd hidden in Denver was important enough to risk her life documenting. Important enough that someone had killed her to keep it secret. I thought about Roderick's visit yesterday, his calculated threats, about ranch accidents, about the business card connecting him to the equipment in those photographs, about my daughter unknowingly married to the man who'd murdered her mother. Standing in Natalie's office holding her final message, I understood that I had two choices. I could pretend ignorance, sell the ranch, and spend my remaining years wondering what really happened to my wife. Or I could follow the trail she'd left me no matter where it led. The decision wasn't difficult. Natalie had died trying to protect our land and our community. The least I could do was finish what she'd started. I pocketed the key and headed for my truck. Denver was 3 hours away, and I had a safety deposit box to open. That same afternoon, Bryce and Vanessa arrived with good news. I was loading supplies into my truck for the Denver trip when my son's pickup rumbled up the drive. Bryce climbed out wearing his usual worried expression, the same look he'd carried since his trucking business started hemorrhaging money. Behind him, Vanessa clutched a leather briefcase like salvation. "Dad, perfect timing. We need to talk about your future." They followed me into the kitchen where Vanessa spread papers across the breakfast table with practiced efficiency. "Stephen, I've been analyzing the local market," she said in her smooth realtor voice. "Property values have plateaued, but there's significant development interest. I'm not selling." Bryce leaned forward. "Dad, hear us out. $3 million cash, quick closing, no contingencies. You could buy that place in town, maybe get an RV for traveling." "I never wanted any such thing." Vanessa pulled out glossy brochures. "These retirement communities offer everything: golf, medical facilities, social activities. No more worrying about cattle or equipment." I studied my son's face, seeing desperation beneath his enthusiasm. "How much do you owe, Bryce?" The question hit like a slap. His smile faltered. "What? Your business. How deep in the hole are you?" Vanessa's hand found his arm. "Stephen, this isn't about money. Like hell it isn't. Who's been talking to you? Who put this in your heads?" Bryce's shoulders sagged. "Dad, please. Just listen. Vanessa and I have been discussing your situation. Living alone at your age with all these responsibilities. My situation is fine." "No, it's not." Vanessa's voice turned sharp. "You're isolated, grieving, making poor decisions. Yesterday you acted paranoid in town, asking Howard strange questions." My blood chilled. Someone had been watching me. "Dad," Bryce said quietly, "Vanessa and I already signed papers. We think you need help making big decisions. It's not about money. It's about your safety." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. "What papers?" Vanessa opened her briefcase with clinical precision. "A petition for competency evaluation. We're concerned about your mental state since Natalie's death. The isolation, conspiracy theories, inability to make rational decisions." I stared at legal documents bearing my son's signature. My own child declaring me mentally unfit. "The evaluation is next week," Bryce said, unable to meet my eyes. 3 doctors will assess your cognitive function, decision-making capacity, ability to manage your affairs. And if they find me incompetent, the court appoints a guardian to handle your finances and property," Vanessa explained with satisfaction. "For your protection." I looked at my son, the boy I'd taught to drive, to fish, to work with his hands, the man whose business I'd helped finance when banks wouldn't. "They got to you, didn't they? Promise to pay your debts if you helped them get the ranch." "Dad, no one got to me. I'm trying to help." "You're trying to steal my land for whoever's paying your bills?" Bryce's face flushed. "That's exactly the paranoid thinking that proves you need help. There's no conspiracy, Dad. Just a family trying to care for a stubborn old man who can't accept reality." They gathered their papers and headed for the door. "The evaluation is next week," Bryce called back. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be, Dad." I watched them drive away, understanding that I was truly alone now. My daughter married to a killer. My son bought by the same people who'd murdered his mother. Denver couldn't wait. Whatever Natalie had hidden might be my only chance to save everything. The following night, I drove to Denver, avoiding main highways. I'd waited until midnight to leave, taking back roads through the mountains where surveillance would be harder. The 3-hour drive gave me too much time to think about Bryce's betrayal, about the competency evaluation hanging over my head. By dawn, I'd reached the city limits. First National Bank sat in downtown's financial district, a granite monument to old money. I waited until they opened, watching commuters hurry past with coffee and smartphones, living normal lives untouched by murder and conspiracy. The safety deposit box clerk was young with kind eyes who didn't ask questions when I presented Natalie's key and death certificate. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Mills," she said, leading me to a private room. Box 247 was larger than expected metal and surprisingly heavy. My hands shook as I lifted the lid, revealing 3 folders and a small digital recorder. The first folder contained surveillance photographs. Not Natalie's usual artistic shots. but telephoto images taken from concealed positions. Dozens of them documenting systematic dumping operations at multiple locations along Willow Creek and 3 other county waterways. Men in hazmat suits, corporate trucks, barrels being emptied into streams feeding the town's water supply. The dates spanned 8 months, an ongoing operation, not a one-time incident. The second folder held chemical analysis reports from independent labs, soil samples showing dangerous toxin levels, water contamination studies painting a picture of environmental terrorism. Maps marked with red X's showed poison spreading through our groundwater system. Within 2 years, it would reach Millfield's wells. Within 5, the entire valley. The third folder contained corporate filings, bank records, shipping manifests, a paper trail connecting the dumping to shell companies and offshore accounts. At the center, Cornelius Stone, Roderick's father. But the digital recorder destroyed what remained of my composure. I pressed play with trembling fingers. Natalie's voice filled the room, alive, determined, afraid. It's October 15th. I followed them tonight to the old Morrison place. Stephen, what I've discovered, they're not just poisoning our land. They're running a criminal enterprise taking millions from companies nationwide to illegally dispose of toxic waste. Our creek, our soil, our neighbors' water, all contaminated. Her voice broke. I've documented everything. Chemical signatures match industrial solvents, heavy metals, carcinogens causing birth defects and cancer. They're killing our community for profit. A pause then. If something happens to me, Stephen, they killed me to keep this secret. Don't let them get away with it. Don't let them poison our grandchildren's future. The recording ended, leaving me with the weight of her sacrifice. My wife had been murdered for trying to save our community from environmental terrorism. I gathered the evidence carefully. This wasn't just about our ranch anymore. It was about justice for Natalie, protection for our neighbors stopping a conspiracy, threatening thousands of lives. Leaving the bank, sunlight seemed too bright, the city too normal. People walked past, carrying on ordinary conversations, while I carried proof of mass poisoning. Halfway to my truck, I spotted it, a white pickup, with Montana plates parked across the street. The same vehicle from Natalie's photos. The driver wore a baseball cap pulled low, but I felt his eyes tracking me. They'd followed me to Denver. They knew exactly what I'd found. And now I had to figure out how to use it before they silenced me permanently. The next morning, I called Diana Crawford from a payphone at a Denver diner. I'd spent the night in a cheap motel, afraid to go home with that surveillance truck tailing me. Diana Crawford's name had come up when I'd Googled Environmental Investigative Reporters Colorado. Her byline appeared on corporate cover-ups, illegal dumping politicians taking energy company bribes. Denver Post Crawford speaking. Ms. Crawford, my name is Stephen Mills. I have information about a massive toxic waste operation in Montana. People have been murdered to keep it quiet. A pause. Sir, I get a lot of calls. My wife documented everything before they killed her. I have photographs, chemical analyses, corporate records, and her voice recording naming those responsible. Where are you? An hour later, I sat across from Diana in a Denver Post conference room. She was maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the focused intensity of someone who'd built a career exposing lies. I spread Natalie's evidence across the table like cards that could win or lose everything. Diana examined each photograph methodically, comparing them to chemical reports. These toxin levels, this isn't just illegal dumping, this is environmental terrorism. My wife traced it to a network of companies. Shell corporations, offshore accounts run by Cornelius Stone. Diana's fingers flew across her laptop. Stone, here we go. Cornelius Stone, multiple LLCs in Delaware, Wyoming, Nevada. Classic money laundering setup. She looked up. Stephen, we're talking about a multi-state criminal enterprise. I played Natalie's recording. Diana listened without interruption, taking notes, her expression darkening with each revelation. Your wife was incredibly brave and thorough. This is Pulitzer-level documentation. Can you publish it? I need verification first. Corporate Filings Lab results cross-reference the chemical signatures. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my EPA contact and someone at the FBI who specializes in environmental crimes. While Diana made calls, I watched Denver traffic, thinking about normal people living normal lives while poison spread through Montana groundwater. Good news, Diana said, hanging up. The EPA has been investigating similar operations in 3 states. Your wife's evidence fills gaps in their case. The FBI is very interested. What happens now? We expose them tomorrow night. I'll come with you to confront them. I need their confession on record. Too dangerous. If they killed Natalie, that's why we'll have backup. She dialed again. Detective Thornfield Diana Crawford. I need tactical support for an environmental terrorism investigation. She covered the phone. Thornfield's been wanting to nail corporate criminals for years. He'll position officers around your ranch close enough to intervene. My hands shook. You want me to call them? Tell them you're ready to negotiate. Make them think they've won, that you're giving up. They'll come to gloat, maybe get careless. Diana handed me her phone. Call now. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. I dialed Roderick's number, heart-hammering. Stephen, I was hoping you'd call. Have you reconsidered our offer? Maybe. Can we talk tonight's not good, but tomorrow evening? Perfect. My father and I will drive up tomorrow at 8 p.m. We have a final offer you can't refuse. The line went dead. Diana was already typing. They took the bait, she said with satisfaction. Tomorrow night, we end this. I stared at her laptop screen where she'd begun drafting the story that would either save my community or get us both killed. What if they don't confess? Diana's smile was sharp as a blade. Stephen, I've been doing this 15 years. Men like Cornelius Stone can't resist explaining how clever they are, especially when they think they're about to win. The next evening at exactly 8 p.m., Cornelius Stone's black sedan pulled into my driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as two figures emerged: Roderick in his usual expensive suit, and an older man who moved with the calculated confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. Cornelius Stone looked exactly like what he was: old money wrapped in tailored wool and quiet menace. Diana had positioned herself in the back hallway an hour ago, wireless recording equipment connected to Detective Thornfield's surveillance van parked a quarter-mile down the road. The plan was simple. Get them talking, capture their confession, let the cavalry arrive. My hands were surprisingly steady as I opened the front door. Cornelius. I shook his hand, noting the soft palm of a man who'd never done physical labor. Good of you to drive all this way. Stephen. His smile was practiced paternal. I've been looking forward to meeting you properly. Roderick's told me so much about the family. They settled into my living room like they owned it. Cornelius took the recliner Natalie's chair, while Roderick perched on the couch's edge, nervous energy radiating from every muscle. I understand you've reconsidered our offer, Cornelius said, pulling out a leather portfolio. Smart man, sometimes it takes time to see reason. This ranch has been in my family 80 years. And what a legacy. But times change, Stephen. You're alone now, getting older. These 1,200 acres are too much for any one man to handle. I poured coffee with hands that barely trembled. The environmental impact concerns me. What exactly does your company do? Cornelius's smile never wavered. We solve problems, Stephen. Industrial waste, chemical disposal, regulatory headaches. We make them disappear. Like you made my wife's concerns disappear. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Roderick shifted uncomfortably, but Cornelius remained perfectly still. Your wife was a lovely woman. Tragic accident, those brake failures, especially in older vehicles. Funny thing about brakes, they don't usually fail on their own. Cornelius leaned forward, his mask slipping slightly. Stephen, I'm going to be direct. Your wife was too curious for her own good. She started asking questions, taking pictures, collecting samples. That kind of behavior can be problematic. Problematic enough to kill her. Accidents happen, especially to people who don't understand the bigger picture. Cornelius stood, using his height to loom over me. We're offering you $3 million to walk away. Take it and live comfortably for the rest of your natural life. Refuse, and I'll have the same accident as Natalie. Roderick finally spoke, his voice tight with stress. Our associate is very skilled at solving problems permanently. Brake lines, gas leaks, hunting accidents. Montana's a dangerous place for stubborn old men. Is that a threat? Cornelius laughed cold and sharp. It's reality. We've invested too much in this operation to let one grieving widower destroy it. Your wife learned that lesson. You can learn it the easy way, or the hard way. Actually, Diana said, stepping out of the hallway with her recording equipment, thousands of people just heard that confession. The color drained from Cornelius's face. What the hell? Diana Crawford, Denver Post. Thank you for that detailed admission of murder and environmental terrorism. Roderick lunged toward her, but the sound of sirens was already growing louder. Car doors slammed outside. Boots on the porch steps. You set us up. Roderick spun toward me, his face twisted with rage. You lying old bastard. He launched himself across the room just as Detective Thornfield kicked in my front door, 3 officers behind him with weapons drawn. Montana State Police, nobody move! Cornelius raised his hands slowly, his arrogant mask finally cracking. This is entrapment. Illegal recording. My lawyers will be very busy, Diana said, still recording, because this conversation is going live on the Denver Post website in about 10 minutes. I watched them cuff the men who'd killed my wife, feeling something I hadn't experienced since April Hope. Diana's expose hit the Denver Post website at 6 a.m. the next morning. I was feeding cattle when my phone started ringing. Reporters, neighbors, distant relatives who'd seen the story spreading across social media like wildfire. The headline read, Montana Rancher Exposes Environmental Murder Conspiracy, with Diana's byline and a photo of our ranch at sunrise. By noon, the story had been picked up by CNN, Fox News, and the major networks. Diana's article laid out everything Natalie's systematic documentation, the illegal dumping operation, the corporate shell game, and the recorded confession that had sealed Cornelius and Roderick's fate. I was watching the coverage on my kitchen television when Detective Thornfield called. Stephen, you need to see this. Turn to Channel 7. The screen showed FBI agents in tactical gear raiding a warehouse outside Billings. According to the reporter, federal agents were executing simultaneous search warrants across 4 states, targeting properties linked to Stone's criminal network. Based on evidence provided by Montana rancher Stephen Mills, the anchor explained federal investigators have uncovered what they're calling the largest illegal toxic waste disposal operation in U.S. history. The phone rang again. This time it was Diana. Stephen, it's exploding. The EPA is calling it environmental terrorism. The Justice Department is talking RICO charges. And we just got word they arrested Curtis Fleming this morning. Curtis Fleming, the man from Natalie's photographs, the one who'd helped Roderick dump poison into our creek. He's already talking, Diana continued. Apparently he doesn't want to face federal murder charges. His lawyer called my editor an hour ago. Fleming's willing to testify about everything. The brake line sabotage, the dumping schedule, the whole operation. I sank into my kitchen chair, overwhelmed. What's he saying? That Cornelius Stone ordered your wife's murder when she got too close to exposing them. That Roderick cut her brake lines on Highway 12, knowing she'd be driving that route to her veterinary conference in Missoula. That they've been poisoning Montana groundwater for 2 years, taking millions from companies nationwide to illegally dispose of industrial waste. The television showed Cornelius and Roderick being led from the courthouse. In shackles, their expensive suits replaced by orange jumpsuits. Cornelius kept his head high, still radiating arrogance even in handcuffs. Roderick looked broken, defeated, the weight of his crimes finally crushing his shoulders. Federal prosecutors are seeking life sentences, the reporter announced. The environmental damage is estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars, affecting water supplies for over 50,000 residents across 4 states. I thought about our neighbors, the families who'd been drinking poisoned water without knowing it, the livestock that had died, the cancer rates that would probably spike in the coming years. All of it for Cornelius Stone's profit margins. My phone buzzed with a text from Bryce. Dad, I saw the news. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? Then another from Adrian. I had no idea. Please forgive me. I stared at the messages, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sadness. My children had betrayed me, but they'd been manipulated by master criminals. The competency evaluation was already canceled hard to declare someone mentally unstable when they'd just exposed a multi-state conspiracy. The television switched to a live shot from the EPA cleanup site at Willow Creek. Workers in hazmat suits were installing filtration systems, testing soil samples, beginning the long process of environmental restoration. The cleanup is expected to take years and cost taxpayers millions, the reporter said. But thanks to one man's determination to find the truth about his wife's death, one of the largest environmental crimes in American history has been stopped. I walked outside to check on the cattle breathing clean Montana air and watching the sun set over land that was finally safe again. Natalie's photographs had started this journey, but it was her courage and the evidence she died protecting that had brought these criminals to justice. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to rebuild relationships with my children, but tonight, for the first time since April, I could sleep, knowing that my wife's killers would spend the rest of their lives in federal prison. Justice had been served. Natalie could rest in peace. 6 months later, spring came early to the ranch. I stood in our kitchen doorway watching morning sunlight stream across pastures where new grass pushed through soil that was finally clean. The EPA had finished their work in February, declaring our water safe and land restored. The scars were healing both in the earth and in our family. Adrian's car was already in the driveway she'd been coming by every morning since moving back to help with ranch work. The divorce from Roderick had been finalized in January, just before his sentencing. 25 years in federal prison. His father got life without parole, dying in his orange jumpsuit, while his criminal empire crumbled. "Morning, Dad." Adrienne appeared in the kitchen, hands already dirty from feeding horses. She'd traded designer clothes for work boots and flannel shirts, rediscovering the ranch girl she'd been before money complicated her life. "Coffee's fresh," I said, pouring 2 cups. "Bryce coming by today. Around noon, he's bringing the kids." She accepted the mug gratefully. Emma's excited about the memorial garden. She wants to help plant wildflowers. The memorial garden had been my winter project, a small patch near the creek, where Natalie used to photograph wildlife. I'd chosen her favorite flowers, Indian paintbrush, lupine mountain asters, simple Montana blooms that would return each spring. Bryce had lost his trucking business, but found work with a construction crew in town. Hard labor that seemed to ease the guilt he carried. We were rebuilding trust one conversation at a time, like laying foundation stones. "He's been sober 3 months," Adrian said quietly, "since the trial ended." I nodded. Addiction had been Bryce's way of handling shame, but he was fighting back to the man I'd raised. Recovery was possible for people and for land. The afternoon brought grandchildren's laughter echoing across pastures, where cattle grazed on grass that would never again be poisoned. Emma, now 7, helped me plant purple lupine while her brother chased butterflies between fence posts. "Grandpa, will Grandma Natalie see the flowers?" Emma asked, her small hands gentle with seedlings. "Every spring when they bloom," I told her. "She'll see them and remember how much we love her." As evening approached, I walked alone to the small cemetery on the hill, where 4 generations of my family rested. Natalie's headstone was simple granite, "Beloved wife, mother, truth seeker." I knelt beside her grave, placing fresh wildflowers from the memorial garden. "You didn't just save our ranch, love," I whispered. "You saved our whole community. The water's clean now. Kids can swim in Willow Creek again. And those men will never hurt another family." The wind rustled through cottonwoods, carrying the scent of clean earth and new growth. Somewhere in that sound, I heard her voice reminding me that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was doing what's right, despite the cost. Walking back toward the house, I saw lights glowing in every window. Adrian cooking dinner, Bryce helping grandchildren with homework. 3 generations gathered around the table where Natalie and I had shared 42 years of morning coffee and evening conversations. The ranch would continue. The family would heal. And in the mountains surrounding our valley, spring water flowed clean and pure again, carrying life instead of poison. Natalie had given her life to protect what mattered most. The least I could do was spend the rest of mine honoring that gift. You know, folks, at 67 years old, I've learned that God works in mysterious ways. When I lost Natalie, I thought my world had ended. But the Lord had a different plan. He used her courage and those photographs to expose the truth and save our community. This true story taught me that sometimes the strongest among us are those who fight for what's right, even when it costs them everything. Natalie showed me that real strength isn't about holding on to anger. It's about holding on to what matters: family, land, and justice. Grandpa's stories like mine remind us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when guided by faith. God gave me the wisdom to see through the lies, the courage to seek justice, and the grace to forgive my children. Without his guidance, I never would have found the strength to take on those powerful men who thought they could poison our land and murder my wife. Looking back on this true story, I realize that every trial we face is part of God's greater plan. He used my grief to uncover a conspiracy that threatened thousands of innocent lives. He turned my family's betrayal into an opportunity for redemption and healing. These grandpa stories matter because they show how the Lord works through broken people like me. When I thought I was alone, he provided allies like Howard and Diana. When I felt defeated, he gave me the evidence I needed to seek justice. True story after true story proves that with God's help, even the smallest voice can speak truth to power. Grandpa's stories teach us that it's never too late to fight for what's right. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for the truth when it seemed impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that justice is possible. Sometimes we all need reminding that with faith and courage, even the darkest secrets can't stay hidden forever. At exactly 5 a.m., I heard frantic pounding on my front door. When I opened it, my daughter-in-law stood there with absolute terror in her eyes. "Dad, please don't go to work today. Just trust me." I had no idea what was wrong. She refused to explain, only begging me to stay home. I decided to trust her and called in sick. By noon, when the police called with devastating news, I realized she had just saved my life. That terrifying morning changed everything. Before I tell you what the police told me at noon, comment where you're watching this story from and whether you've ever had a family member save your life. The bitter Denver cold cut through my dreams like a knife, but it wasn't the February chill that jolted me awake. It was the sound of desperate fists pounding against my front door at exactly 5:02 in the morning. Nobody knocks like that unless the world is ending. I stumbled toward the front door, my 65-year-old joints protesting with every step. Outside, pre-dawn darkness wrapped around my Cheeseman Park neighborhood, broken only by streetlights casting shadows across snow-dusted lawns. The pounding continued more frantic now. When I pulled open the heavy oak door, the last person I expected to see was my daughter-in-law, Elizabeth. She stood on my doorstep in pajamas and a hastily thrown-on coat, her face pale as winter moonlight. Her usually perfect blonde hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her green eyes were rimmed red with unshed tears. "Elizabeth," I whispered, suddenly wide awake. "What in God's name are you doing here?" She glanced nervously over her shoulder before stepping closer. "Winston, Dad, please don't leave the house today. Please just trust me." The desperation in her voice sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold air rushing through my doorway. In the 3 years since she'd married my eldest son, Dominic, I'd never seen Elizabeth like this. She was always composed, the picture of grace and professionalism. This trembling woman before me was someone entirely different. "Elizabeth, you're frightening me," I said, reaching out to steady her. "What's wrong? Is Dominic all right?" She shook her head quickly. "Dominic is fine. He's still sleeping. He doesn't know I'm here." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I heard him on the phone last night. He's planning something for when you go to work today." My eldest son. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Dominic had always been ambitious, sometimes ruthlessly so, but hearing his own wife speak about him with such fear made my blood run cold. "Planning what exactly?" I asked. "I don't know the details," she said, words tumbling out in a rush. "But please, Dad, just stay home today. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave this house." I studied her face in the porch light, searching for any sign this might be some misunderstanding. Elizabeth had always been caught in the middle between Dominic's ambitions and family harmony. She'd never been one for drama, and she certainly wouldn't risk her marriage over nothing. "You're asking me to trust you without explaining why," I said carefully. She reached out and grabbed my hands with both of hers. Her fingers were ice cold and shaking. "Something terrible will happen if you leave this house today. I can feel it, Winston, please." For 37 years, I'd built Crawford Construction from nothing into a $50 million empire. I'd made countless decisions based on gut instincts and advice from people I trusted. Standing there in my doorway at 5 in the morning, looking into the frightened eyes of a woman who was risking everything to warn me, I made another one. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll stay home." The relief that washed over her face was immediate and profound. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." After she left, I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, staring at Barbara Henderson's number. My secretary had been with me for 20 years, and I'd never once called in without a legitimate reason. "Barbara," I said when she answered on the third ring, "I won't be coming in today. I'm feeling under the weather." As I hung up the phone, one question echoed in my mind like a warning bell. What exactly was my own son planning to do to me? 3 hours had passed since Elizabeth's warning, but I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. I sat in my breakfast nook with coffee and the Denver Post, though the words blurred together. Every few minutes I glanced toward the window, half expecting something that would explain my daughter-in-law's desperate plea. The doorbell's chime cut through the morning silence. I set down my cup and walked to the front door, heart hammering. Through the frosted glass I could make out a tall figure in a dark coat. When I opened it, I found myself face to face with my eldest son. "Dominic," the surprise in my voice was genuine. "What are you doing here?" My 35-year-old son stood on my doorstep in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, dark hair, slicked back in that corporate style he'd adopted years ago. But something was off about his usual confident demeanor. His jaw was tight, and his blue eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't identify. Dad. His voice carried genuine confusion. Why aren't you at the office? This isn't like you at all. I studied his face, searching for any hint of the menace Elizabeth had warned me about. I'm feeling under the weather today. Thought I'd take it easy. Dominic stepped closer, brow furrowing with apparent worry. Are you feeling all right? Should I call Dr. Peterson? Just tired, that's all. Nothing a day of rest won't cure. But I noticed how his eyes darted past me into the house as if looking for something. His hands, usually steady, fidgeted with his car keys. Are you certain you can't come in for just an hour? He pressed. The Morrison project needs your signature, and the city inspector is coming this afternoon. There it was. That insistent tone he'd used as a child when he wanted something badly. The same tone that had always made me give in. Dominic, the Morrison project can wait one day. You're perfectly capable of handling the inspector. His smile faltered briefly. Of course, Dad. You're right. He glanced at his expensive watch. Well, I guess I'll handle everything at the office then. Something cold twisted in my stomach. Elizabeth's words echoed. He's planning something for when you go to work today. I'm sure you will, I replied, watching his face carefully. Dominic nodded briskly and turned to leave. Feel better, Dad. I'll check on you later. I watched from my doorway as he walked to his black BMW. Instead of driving away, he sat in the driver's seat and pulled out his phone. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders as he spoke to whoever was on the other end. His voice was too low to catch the words, but his body language spoke volumes. This wasn't a casual business call. His free hand gestured sharply, and twice he glanced back toward my house with an expression I'd never seen before. Frustration mixed with calculation. After several minutes, he ended the call and drove away without looking back. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Elizabeth had been right to warn me. Whatever my son was planning, my absence from the office had clearly disrupted it. The question that terrified me most wasn't what Dominic was planning anymore. It was why my own flesh and blood would want to hurt me at all. By 10:15 that morning, I'd given up pretending to watch the news. The television droned on, but my mind kept circling back to Dominic's strange visit and that tense phone call. I sat in my leather recliner when the shrill ring of my landline cut through my troubled thoughts. Caller ID Crawford Construction. Barbara. Hello, Barbara. I answered, expecting some routine question. Mr. Crawford. Her voice was pitched high with panic. Thank God you answered. There's been a terrible accident at the downtown construction site. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, crashing to the floor. What kind of accident? The crane collapsed. 3 workers are hurt bad, Mr. Crawford. Broken bones may be worse. The ambulances just left for Denver General. My world tilted sideways. In 37 years, we'd never had a serious accident. Our safety record was impeccable. How did this happen? I don't know, but you need to get down here right away. Fire department, paramedics, reporters, everyone's asking questions. I was already reaching for my keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive passed in a blur of racing thoughts. Elizabeth's warning echoed in my mind, but I couldn't see how this connected to Dominic's plans. The scene that greeted me was chaos. Fire trucks blocked half the street, red lights flashing. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the February wind, cordoning off where our tower crane lay twisted like a broken toy. I pushed through the crowd, heart sinking as I took in the destruction. The crane had fallen onto the partially completed building, crushing the framework where our crew had been working. Mr. Crawford. A reporter thrust a microphone in my face. Channel 7 News. Can you comment on the safety violations that led to this accident? Safety violations. I stopped cold. What are you talking about? Sources say Crawford Construction has been cutting corners on safety equipment to boost profits. What's your response? My mouth went dry. That's absolutely false. We have the highest safety standards in the industry. But I could hear angry voices from workers gathered nearby. Phrases like cheap equipment and knew this would happen drifted over the noise. I spotted our site foreman Pete Morrison talking to a police officer. When he saw me, his expression hardened. Pete, what happened here? He looked at me with disgust I'd never seen before. You tell me, Mr. Crawford. You're the one who signed off on the budget cuts. What budget cuts, Pete? I have no idea what you're talking about. Before he could answer, a tall man in a dark coat approached. His badge read, Detective Johnson, Denver Police. Mr. Crawford, we've received serious allegations about safety violations at your company. The words hit like physical blows. Detective, I can assure you, Crawford Construction maintains the highest safety standards. That may be, sir, but we've received an anonymous tip claiming you've been deliberately cutting safety costs to increase profits. His gray eyes studied my face intently. We need to examine your company records immediately. The crowd seemed to press closer, faces blurred with accusation and suspicion. In 2 hours, I'd gone from respected businessman to someone suspected of endangering his own employees. This is a serious investigation now, Mr. Crawford, Detective Johnson continued. We'll need access to your office and all financial records related to this project. Standing there in the February cold, surrounded by the wreckage and suspicious stares of people I'd worked with for years, Elizabeth's warning finally made terrible sense. This wasn't an accident. This was exactly what my son had been planning all along. The drive back to my office felt like a funeral procession. Detective Johnson followed behind in his unmarked sedan, while I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The familiar downtown Denver route seemed foreign now, as if I was seeing my own city through a stranger's eyes. When we reached Crawford Construction's 20th floor, my office felt like a trap, rather than the sanctuary it had been for 3 decades. After you, Mr. Crawford, Detective Johnson said, pulling out a folded warrant. Barbara looked up from her desk, face still pale from the morning's chaos. Mr. Crawford, I've been fielding calls from reporters all morning. Nothing for now, Barbara. I turned to the detective. What do you need to see? Financial records, safety reports, correspondence related to the downtown project. He pulled on latex gloves. Let's start with your filing cabinet. I unlocked the metal drawers with trembling hands. Watching him methodically rifle through folders, I'd organized myself. Everything looked normal until he reached downtown project, safety reports. Interesting, he murmured, pulling out a thick document. Can you explain this? He held up a report titled Cost Reduction Initiative, Safety Department, with my signature clearly visible at the bottom. The document outlined cutting safety spending by 40% to maximize quarterly profits. I've never seen that document before in my life, I whispered. Your signature says otherwise. His eyebrows rose skeptically. He continued searching, finding more damning evidence. A printed email with my name read, Cut safety budget immediately. We need higher profit margins this quarter, and safety equipment is an unnecessary expense. Barbara, have you ever seen these documents? My secretary leaned over, confusion creasing her face. Mr. Crawford, I handle all your correspondence, and I've never typed anything like this. Detective Johnson moved to my personal safe. Open this as well. With shaking hands, I entered the combination. Inside were more forged documents, purchase orders for substandard safety equipment invoices, for suppliers I'd never heard of, all bearing my signature. Mr. Crawford. Detective Johnson said, his voice taking on a formal tone that sent chills down my spine. This evidence suggests you knowingly endangered your workers to increase profits. The room spun around me. 37 years of building a reputation for integrity destroyed by documents I'd never seen. Someone planted these, I said desperately. Someone with access to my office, my signature, my safe. That's a serious accusation. Who would have that kind of access? The answer hit me like a physical blow, but I couldn't say my own son's name aloud. Based on this evidence, you're looking at criminal negligence charges, endangering workers, possibly manslaughter if those injured don't make it. His words fell like hammer blows. You could be facing serious prison time if convicted. Standing in my own office, surrounded by forged evidence of crimes I'd never committed, I realized Dominic hadn't just planned to frame me. He'd planned to destroy me completely. Just as Detective Johnson reached for his handcuffs, the office door burst open. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, clutching a thick manila folder against her chest. Detective, before you arrest him, you need to see this evidence. Detective Johnson paused. Ma'am, this is a police investigation. I'm going to have to ask you to... I'm Elizabeth Crawford, Chief Financial Officer of this company, she said, stepping forward with newfound authority. And I have proof that my father-in-law is being framed. Barbara gasped. I stared at Elizabeth in shock. How had she known to come here? Elizabeth, what are you doing here? She looked at me with eyes full of regret. Dad, I need to tell you the truth. Last night I overheard Dominic on the phone. I only knew he planned to plant documents in your office today. I had no idea about the construction site accident. Detective Johnson frowned. What kind of documents? Elizabeth opened her folder and spread financial reports across my desk. I'm the CFO here, Detective. I know every transaction in this company. And I can prove Winston had no access to the accounts used to purchase substandard safety equipment. She pointed to a computer printout. These purchases were made last Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. Winston was at Denver General visiting his friend after surgery. I have hospital visitor logs to prove it. Detective Johnson leaned over the documents, his expression beginning to shift. Go on? The email you found was sent from an IP address, tracing to a coffee shop on 16th Street. Winston was nowhere near downtown that day. Elizabeth pulled out more papers. These purchase orders were processed through a subsidiary account Winston doesn't have access to. Only 3 people have authorization: myself, Dominic, and our site foreman, Gerald Murphy. She opened her laptop on my desk. Our system logs every transaction with timestamps and IP addresses. The purchases were made using Gerald Murphy's login credentials. The screen showed detailed transaction logs. Gerald Murphy purchased all this substandard equipment using company funds. The invoices were doctored to make it appear Winston authorized them. But the signatures, Detective Johnson said, digital forgeries. Dominic had high-resolution scans of Winston's signature from legitimate contracts. With the right software, anyone can create convincing fakes. Detective Johnson studied the evidence, his expression growing troubled. Mrs. Crawford, are you saying your own husband orchestrated this? Elizabeth's voice broke slightly. I'm saying these financial records don't lie. Someone used Gerald Murphy's credentials to purchase faulty equipment, then created false documentation to frame Winston. She pulled out one final document. And here's the smoking gun, detective. A wire transfer of $50,000 from Dominic Crawford's personal account to Gerald Murphy's bank account, sent 3 days ago. Detective Johnson's eyes widened. Payment for services. That's what it looks like. These purchases that led to today's accident were made by someone else using company funds. Elizabeth closed her laptop and looked directly at him. Detective, you need to investigate Gerald Murphy. He's the one who bought the faulty equipment that caused the crane collapse. The silence was deafening. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. Elizabeth had handed us the key to proving my innocence. But looking at her tear-stained face, I realized what this meant for her marriage, her family, her entire life. She was sacrificing everything to save me. 20 minutes after Elizabeth's revelation, Detective Johnson was coordinating Gerald Murphy's arrest. I watched from my office window as police cars raced toward the downtown construction site. At the site, Gerald was loading tools into his pickup when he spotted approaching police vehicles. His weathered face went pale, and he dropped a wrench that clattered against concrete. Gerald Murphy, Denver Police. We need you for questioning. Gerald's eyes darted frantically around the fenced construction site, but there was nowhere to run. More police cars blocked the exits. What's this about? Gerald asked, voice cracking. I was just packing up. We'll discuss that at the station, Detective Johnson replied. In the stark interrogation room, Gerald sat across from Detective Johnson at a metal table. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face. Tell me about the safety equipment purchases for the downtown project, Detective Johnson began. Gerald straightened, trying to project confidence. All purchases go through Mr. Crawford's approval. I just follow orders. Detective Johnson slid a printout across the table. This shows purchases made using your login credentials. Substandard crane cables, defective safety harnesses, cheap scaffolding. All purchased last Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Crawford told me to cut costs. Those were his direct orders. Interesting. These purchases were made at 2:15 p.m. last Tuesday. Winston Crawford was at Denver General Hospital at that exact time, visiting a friend after surgery. We have visitor logs and security footage confirming his location. Gerald's facade began cracking. Sweat formed on his forehead. Maybe I got the timing wrong. He could have called me. From the hospital. While visiting a sick friend. Detective Johnson leaned forward. We also have the IP address where these orders originated. Your home computer, not any company device Winston had access to. Gerald's hands trembled. I was working from home. Mr. Crawford called with orders. Show me the call log. Gerald fumbled with his phone, scrolling desperately. His breathing became shallow. It must have been deleted somehow. Detective Johnson pulled out another document. Gerald, we have a wire transfer showing $50,000 deposited into your account 3 days ago from Dominic Crawford's personal account. The color drained from Gerald's face completely. That's not what it looks like. What is it then? A bonus, a gift? Detective Johnson's voice was relentless. Because it looks like payment for services rendered. Gerald's composure shattered. His shoulders shook as tears streamed down his cheeks. I can't take this anymore. Dominic Crawford paid me. He paid me to buy cheap equipment and make it look like his father ordered it. The confession hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gerald, tell me everything, from the beginning. Through his tears, Gerald unraveled the conspiracy. Dominic approached me 3 weeks ago, said his father was planning to sell the company and cut jobs. He offered $50,000 to help make his father look incompetent. He wiped his nose with his sleeve. I have text messages, recorded phone calls. Dominic gave me detailed instructions on which equipment to buy and how to forge the paperwork. Detective Johnson nodded grimly. We're going to need all that evidence, Gerald. Every text, every recording, every piece of communication with Dominic Crawford. By 7 that evening, Gerald Murphy's confession had given Detective Johnson everything he needed. Armed with text messages, recorded phone calls, and a detailed timeline of the conspiracy police cars pulled up to Dominic's upscale home in Cherry Creek. Through the front window, Detective Johnson could see Dominic moving frantically around his living room, stuffing clothes and documents into a large suitcase. 2 plane tickets to the Cayman Islands lay on his coffee table next to stacks of cash. Dominic Crawford, you're under arrest, Detective Johnson announced as officers surrounded the house. Dominic froze like a deer in headlights when he saw the police at his door. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled. His expensive suit wrinkled his hair unkempt. The confident executive facade had completely crumbled. Elizabeth stood in the doorway behind the officers, her face a mask of pain and disappointment. I was there too, having insisted on witnessing my son's arrest, despite Detective Johnson's advice to stay away. This is a mistake, Dominic said as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. I don't know what Gerald told you, but he's lying. At the police station, Dominic sat in the same interrogation room where Gerald had broken down hours earlier. But unlike the foreman, Dominic maintained his arrogant composure. Gerald Murphy is a disgruntled employee trying to save his own skin, Dominic declared. Whatever he told you is fabricated. Detective Johnson placed a digital recorder on the table and pressed play. Dominic's voice filled the room. Listen carefully, Gerald. When the crane fails, it has to look like an accident caused by cheap equipment my father approved. Dominic's face went white, but he didn't break. That's doctored audio. Anyone can fake recordings these days. The detective pulled out printed text messages. What about these messages from your personal phone to Gerald's detailing exactly which safety equipment to purchase and how to forge the paperwork? Gerald had access to company phones. He could have sent those himself. For every piece of evidence, Dominic had an excuse, a deflection, a denial. His legal training served him well, but the mountain of proof was overwhelming. I want to speak with my son, I said finally, unable to watch this charade any longer. Detective Johnson hesitated. Mr. Crawford, I'm not sure that's advisable. Please, just 5 minutes. Alone in the interrogation room, I looked across the table at the man who had once been my pride and joy. The son I'd taught to throw a baseball, helped with homework, walked down the aisle at his wedding. Why, Dominic? My voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do this to me, to our family? For the first time that evening, Dominic's mask slipped. His jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of the anger that had been driving him all along. You really want to know? His voice was cold bitter. Because you always planned to give everything to Nicholas. The company, your respect, your love. Everything was always going to him. The words hit me like physical blows. That's not true, son. Isn't it? Dominic leaned forward, years of resentment pouring out. Nicholas the golden boy, Nicholas the good son. Nicholas who can do no wrong. You were planning to change your will, weren't you? Give him controlling interest in the company I've worked for my entire adult life. I stared at my eldest son, seeing clearly for the first time the jealousy and bitterness that had been eating away at him for years. So you decided to destroy me instead, I said quietly. I decided to take what was rightfully mine. Dominic slammed his fist on the table. I built that company just as much as you did. I deserved to inherit it, not watch you hand it over to my younger brother. The confession spilled out in a torrent of rage and self-justification. The bribes to Gerald, the forged documents, the staged accident. All of it designed to make me look incompetent, so the board would remove me and install Dominic as CEO. I never intended for anyone to get seriously hurt, he said, his voice breaking slightly. The accident was supposed to be minor, just enough to trigger an investigation. When Detective Johnson returned, Dominic had confessed to everything. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one last time. I saw my son, but I also saw a stranger consumed by greed and jealousy. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, but I knew I had to say something. Dominic sat there in handcuffs, his face a mixture of defiance and desperation. "Son," I said quietly, my voice heavy with years of regret, "I never favored Nicholas over you. I love both my boys equally. But love doesn't mean handing over a company to someone who isn't ready for the responsibility." Dominic looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to sit on my lap while I reviewed construction blueprints. "You were always so focused on shortcuts, on quick wins," I continued. "Nicholas earned his promotions through hard work and integrity. I was hoping you'd learn those same values, but instead—" I gestured helplessly at the handcuffs. "It's too late now, Dad," Dominic whispered. "It's never too late for redemption, son, but you have to want it." As they led him away, I made a silent promise that someday, somehow, I would find a way to help my eldest son find his way back to the man I'd always hoped he could become. 1 month later, I sat in my office watching the late afternoon sun cast golden rays across the mahogany desk that had witnessed so much turmoil. The same desk where Detective Johnson had found forged documents, where Elizabeth had spread out financial records that saved my life, where I'd signed papers that would reshape my family's future forever. The chaos had finally settled into something resembling peace. The 3 injured workers from the crane collapse had made full recoveries, thanks to the best medical care our insurance and personal funds could provide. Tommy Rodriguez would walk with a slight limp for the rest of his life. But he'd return to work with a generous settlement, and our guarantee that Crawford Construction would always prioritize safety above profits. The Denver Post had run a front-page story titled, "Local CEO Cleared of All Charges, Son's Betrayal Shocks Construction Industry." My reputation, battered but not broken, was slowly being restored. Clients who had distanced themselves during the investigation were returning with new projects and renewed trust. Barbara knocked softly on my door. "Mr. Crawford, Nicholas, and Elizabeth are here for the meeting." I looked up to see my younger son and daughter-in-law standing in the doorway. Nicholas had grown into his new role as Executive Vice President, with remarkable grace handling the media attention and client concerns with maturity beyond his 30 years. Elizabeth, now our Chief Financial Officer, had earned the respect of every employee in the building. "Come in, both of you," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. Nicholas took his seat, but Elizabeth hesitated. The past month had been hardest on her. She'd lost her marriage, her home, and the life she'd built with Dominic, all to save a family that wasn't even hers by blood. "Elizabeth, please sit down," I said gently. "We have important business to discuss." William Thompson, our family attorney for 25 years, spread the legal documents across my desk. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he explained each clause and provision. "The restructuring is straightforward," William said in his measured voice. "Nicholas will receive 35% ownership of Crawford Construction. Elizabeth will receive 25%, and Winston will retain 40% as chairman of the board." I picked up my fountain pen, the same one I'd used to sign my first construction contract 37 years ago. "This feels right," I said, looking at both of them. "You've both earned this." Nicholas leaned forward. "Dad, are you sure about this? It's a huge decision. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." I signed the first document with steady hands. "Elizabeth risked everything to save me. And you, Nicholas, you've shown leadership and integrity that this company needs." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "Winston, I don't deserve this. I was married to the man who tried to destroy you." "You were married to my son," I corrected her. "But when it mattered most, you chose what was right over what was easy. That takes courage I'm not sure I would have had in your position." As I signed the final document making the ownership transfer official, I thought about Dominic. He was serving his 5-year sentence at the Colorado Correctional Center, and according to his lawyer, he'd refused all visitors, including me. The judge had been harsh, but fair. "Corporate fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and endangering the lives of workers," she'd said during sentencing. "These crimes strike at the heart of public trust in American business." I'd sat in the courtroom gallery watching my eldest son in his orange jumpsuit, wondering where I'd gone wrong as a father. Elizabeth had been beside me, holding my hand, as tears streamed down both our faces. "There's something else," I said, closing the legal folder. "I've been thinking about Dominic." Nicholas and Elizabeth exchanged glances. We'd all been thinking about him, but none of us had known how to bring it up. I know he made terrible choices, I continued, but he's still my son. And someday when he's served his time and hopefully learned from his mistakes, I want him to know that forgiveness is possible. Elizabeth reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. That's very generous, Winston. It's not generous, I said. It's what families do. We forgive each other even when forgiveness seems impossible. The sun was setting now, painting the Denver skyline in shades of orange and pink. In a month, everything had changed. My company was stronger, my family was healing, and I'd learned that sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. As Nicholas and Elizabeth left my office chatting quietly about tomorrow's board meeting, I remained at my desk, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the growing darkness. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Sometimes the people we trust most can surprise us in ways we never expected. This true story holds lessons every family should hear. Don't be like me. Don't fail to understand true fairness between your children. I thought giving opportunities based on merit was fair, but I never understood Dominic's perspective or addressed his feelings of being overlooked. As parents, we must see fairness through each child's heart, not just our own eyes. What we call merit-based decisions can feel like favoritism to a child desperately seeking our approval. This Grandpa Stories moment taught me that blood doesn't always determine loyalty. Elizabeth, who married into our family, showed more integrity than my own flesh and blood. She risked everything to save me from a conspiracy I never saw coming. Her sacrifice reminds us that love is proven through actions, not words. The most painful lesson from this true story is that unaddressed resentment poisons family relationships. Dominic's jealousy grew for years, hidden beneath professional success. As fathers, we must create safe spaces for children to express feelings without fear of judgment. God has a way of placing guardian angels when we need them most. Elizabeth was mine. When she knocked on my door that February morning, she answered a calling to do what was right, even when it cost her everything. Her courage saved 3 workers and prevented injustice that would have destroyed an innocent man. These grandpa stories carry wisdom across generations. Sometimes warnings come from unexpected sources. A daughter-in-law who barely knew me proved more trustworthy than the son I'd raised for 35 years. Faith played a crucial role in my survival. When everything seemed lost, when evidence was stacked against me, when my son's betrayal threatened to crush my spirit, I believed truth would prevail. And it did through Elizabeth's courage and Detective Johnson's investigation. This true story reminds us that forgiveness isn't just about the person who wronged us. It's about freeing ourselves from hatred and resentment. I'm still working on forgiving Dominic, but harboring anger only poisons our hearts. The Lord works in mysterious ways, using our darkest moments to reveal who truly stands with us. Elizabeth's warning wasn't just about that day, it was about choosing integrity over comfort, truth over convenience. If this story touched your heart and made you think about trust and fairness in your family, please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're watching from. These grandpa stories need sharing because they carry lessons that could save someone else's family from destruction. Share this story to remind others that warnings come from unexpected places, and that treating our children with genuine fairness, not just what we think is fair, might be the most important parenting decision we ever make.